All right. Welcome back. We're going to get right in it. God, take away everything I think I know about this book, about this process, and about you, God, so that I can have an experience with you. Woo! Your own experiences. Okay, we ended off last time at XVII, forward to the second edition. Pens and highlighters ready? All right, let's do it. So, last thing we said was strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. So if we want permanent recovery, what's necessary is strenuous work, one alcoholic with another. Now, if that is our main focus, right, and that is becoming like why we go to meetings. So today, I've been sober 20 years. I don't go to a meeting necessarily to hear a speaker. I don't go to a meeting necessarily to, like hear the share, which means I'm not judging speakers. I'm not judging shares. It's not a social thing. So I'm not like they're getting all hurt if someone doesn't say hi to me and stuff like that. My main purpose for going to a meeting today that supersedes all purposes is who can I find to help? And when I do that, it makes it a different experience for me. That is why I'm able to go to a meeting today with time and not hate everybody and not judge everybody and not sit in resentment and not sit in fear and not sit in butthurtness or whatever, right? Because my reasoning has shifted. So, strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. So it says, hence the two men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of the Akron City Hospital. These two alcoholics that they're talking about are Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith. Neither of them have an amazing amount of time, which means that we don't have to have an amazing amount of time either to work with other people. It's a common misconception in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous today, or all 12-step fellowships, that you need to have all this time under your belt or a complete working knowledge of the 12 steps in order to work with another human being. And basically, sometimes it takes a long time sometimes it takes people a year to get through all 12 steps. So those people who are carrying that message of you can't work with someone until you have completed all 12 steps are carrying the message of it's okay to be physically sober. It's okay to be sane on the days that you're working with your sponsor, but you need to stay spiritually sick until we deem you ready to treat it. That thinking is crazy. So, Bill and Bob, they're out there working right away because they know they need to connect to God. They know that this is the spiritual remedy to work with people, so they're getting into it, right? They know it's going to keep them sober. Now, they're talking about the ward here of the Akron City Hospital. Now, the ward back in the day was basically the hallway of the hospital, right? So you have rooms on either side, and here's this hallway, and they would set up cots for us, okay? The reason why this is important is because that's where alcoholics and drug addicts would be detoxing. We would be throwing up, pissing ourselves, shitting ourselves, hallucinating, in the shakes, fevers, all kinds of craziness out in the middle of the hallway in front of everybody else. And I'm pointing this out because it lets us know what the doctors basically thought of us as drug addicts and alcoholics. They thought we were the scum of the earth. They thought that we were there because we were morally sick. They thought we were there because we were weak-willed. And they basically didn't feel like we deserved a room. The only reason they would put us in a room is if we were going to die. And they said, okay, cool. These alcoholics, these drug addicts, they can die with dignity, but basically F them otherwise, right? The reason why this is important is because this new dude that we're going to talk about, it says, their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became AA number 3. We're going to underline AA number 3, and the guy I'm about to talk about is Bill Dobson, right? So Bill Dobson is there on a detox. He's in a hallway. Doctor comes up to him and says, Bill Dobson? He said, yes. We got to move you to a room. Bill Dobson starts panicking, right? He's in this room now, he's alone, and he's thinking he's going to die because he knows the deal. And he's just getting desperate. His whole life is flashing before his eyes. He doesn't know what he's going to do. And all of a sudden, Bill Wilson and Bob Smith, they show up in his room. Now, the doctors moved him there for that reason, but he didn't know that. But by the time that they got there, Bill Dobson was so willing to listen to anything because he thought he was going to die that they just seemed like an oasis, right? So they basically carried the message of alcoholism and the recovery message of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So it says he never had another drink. It says this work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. Again, they're using the word work to describe this process. So working with others is working the program. That is how it's designed, right? There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. It says when the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time. We're going to highlight that, and we're going to write first meeting. So when Bill returned to New York in the fall, the first meeting had already existed, and it was in Akron, Ohio. So the very first meeting was in Akron. It says the second small group, or the second meeting, promptly took shape in New York, to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York who were trying to form groups in other cities. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. So right now we're talking about 3 years sobriety tops, okay? Now that's all it took to basically convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. Now, 3 years might not seem like a lot of time right now because you may look around your fellowship and see people with decades and decades of sobriety, but this is really a reminder that every day that we are sober is a miracle, is a complete miracle, and that we should be grateful for it. It says, it is now time the struggling groups thought to place their message and unique experience before the world. So now they're like, okay, cool. This thing actually works. We should spread this all over the world. So they came up with 3 ideas. 1 was to write a book. 2 was to build hospitals all over the world. And 3, to train ministers to carry this message at these hospitals, right? Now, only one of those things happened at this time, and that was to write the book. So it says, this determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. The membership had reached about 100 men and women, right? So back here, in this time of this, by the number of members having substantial sobriety, blah, 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 that was about 40 people. So by the time the book was written, we have 100 people who had recovered from alcoholism. Now they're trying to figure out, what do we call this thing? Right? So they came up with some titles. The first title they came up with was The Way Out, but that was already taken. So then they were like, how about Comes the Dawn? That sounds good. Taken. Then 100 Men. Let's call this thing 100 Men. But then some women joined. They didn't want to call it 100 men and a couple women because it just seemed like a mouthful. So then they were like, well, why don't we try the Bill Wilson movement or the Bill W movement? But that just seemed to be really full of hubris, and Bill had enough of that on his own. So they're in this meeting, they're discussing this stuff, and some guy's in the corner, he's got some mental issues, and he's just talking to himself, and he's repeating the words Anonymous Alcoholic, Alcoholics Anonymous, Anonymous Alcoholic. And someone overhears him, and they're like, well, why don't we call this thing Alcoholics Anonymous? And they thought that was a great idea. So basically, the meetings, the fellowship, the program, everything that we're involved with talking about right now is based off of and named after the rantings of some dude who was out of his mind, which is so apropos because most of us are completely insane. But don't worry, there's hope. We don't have to stay that way. So it says, the fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. So there's the fledgling society and then there's the book. They're both called Alcoholics Anonymous, but don't get it twisted, right? So the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is in the book, and the fellowship is the fellowship, which means if you want recovery, you got to go to the book. If you want fellowship, then you go to the fellowship, right? But they're 2 separate things. You don't necessarily find recovery in the meetings, although some people think so. It says the flying blind period ended and AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time. With the appearance of a new book, a great deal began to happen. Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick, unfortunate name, the noted clergyman, reviewed it with approval. In the fall of 1939, Fulton Ausler, then editor of Liberty, printed a piece in his magazine called Alcoholics and God. This brought a rush of 800 frantic inquiries into the little New York office, which meanwhile had been established. Each inquiry was painstakingly answered. Pamphlets and books were sent out. So this is that whole aspect of, us being really deluged, us being really overwhelmed by all these people. And this is kind of the reason why anonymity was first started, is because there were so many people out there that needed help, that there weren't enough of us to really try to help everybody, and we really learned this through the publication of this book. It says, businessmen traveling out of existing groups were referred to these prospective newcomers. New groups started up, and it was found, to the astonishment of everyone, that AA message could be transmitted in the mail as well as word of mouth, right? So the book became the AA message. It was sent out. The stories in the back of the book were equivalent to the AA speakers. Bill's story was equivalent to an AA speaker. And so that's how people basically decided whether or not they wanted to check out the book, because they'd read the story, see if they related to some of them, and they're like, okay, cool, maybe I'll check this thing out, right? So it says, by the end of 1939, it was estimated that 800 alcoholics were on their way to recovery, and we're going to highlight that, okay? So it wasn't that much time between 100 and 800. It was just between writing the book and publishing it, right? In the spring of 1940, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave a dinner for many of his friends, which he invited AA members to tell their stories. So again, this gives you an idea of the second reason for anonymity, right? If we were connected to people like John D. Rockefeller, then you know that some of the people in the fellowship, in the early fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, had to be of some high socioeconomic stature, right? So it was important to omit those last names because, they're trying to keep things even, right? So anyway, John D. Rockefeller, he has some of us over his house for dinner, right? Basically to tell our stories. Now, our motivation for that was Bill was trying to get funding for this book because we were running out of money, right? And he was kind of in a panic. And it was actually John D. Rockefeller's people that were like, you know what? Don't take money from us. You need to be self-sufficient through your own contributions. If you take money from us, then you're going to hand over power, and this thing needs to stay pure. So that whole idea of that tradition actually came from them, not from some, enlightened alcoholic. So it says, news of this got on the world wires. Inquiries poured in again, and many people went to the bookstores to get the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. In March of 1941, the membership had shot up to 2,000. So we're going to highlight 2,000. So again, another epic jump. Then Jack Alexander wrote a feature article in the Saturday Evening Post and placed such a compelling picture of AA before the general public that alcoholics in need of help really deluged us. Deluge means overwhelmed. So Jack Alexander, who was this dude? He was basically a investigative reporter, right? Now, what he was famous for was busting apart institutions and finding fraud in them, right? So he went to Alcoholics Anonymous to basically find out that we were a cult, or find out that we were some pyramid scheme, or find out that we were just, stealing money from people or doing some weird shit, right? But what he wound up finding out was Alcoholics Anonymous was legit. So when he backed Alcoholics Anonymous, and he actually became good friends with Bill, it was a big deal because people knew that he was a no-nonsense kind of a guy, and they trusted his word because he would always go out specifically to bust people. That's what he was famous for. So that's why there was such a big jump, right? So it says by the close of 1941, AA numbered 8,000, right? So 1941 March to the close, it's a jump from 2,000 to 8,000 people, right? So Jack Alexander's article really had an effect on the amount of members, okay? Which should kind of help some people who are skeptical today about Alcoholics Anonymous. If someone like Jack Alexander, and if you don't know who that is, do your own research on him, can validate this program as being legit, then maybe you can too. It says the mushrooming process was in full swing. AA has become a national institution. Then it says, our society then entered a fearsome and exciting adolescent period. Adolescent period, so that's like teenage, right? So what do we think about teenagers? Is there some emotional stability in teenagers? No. I was out of my mind. The test that it was faced was this. Could these large number of erstwhile means formerly erratic. Erratic means unpredictable. Alcoholics successfully meet and work together. The answer to that question? Hell no. Would there be quarrels, fights over membership, leadership, and money? Hell yeah. Would there be strivings for power and prestige? Most definitely. Would there be schisms or divisions which would split AA apart? Absolutely. It says soon AA was beset by these very problems on every side and in every group. Why? Because people were new, right? Which lets us know that the idea of a spiritual experience is a time-consuming, evolving process. We don't get sober and all of a sudden become perfect, okay? Change takes time, which allows us to be patient with ourselves, right? There's no rush. We get to where we are when we get there. And actually, where we are is exactly where we are, and it's perfect at all times because we're always being taken care of, right? So people were basically coming into AA, bringing all their street hustle into the meetings, right? They're trying to get over on each other, trying to scam a little money here and there. They're trying to do stuff, work that. And basically, AA was a total mess, right? So it says, but out of this frightening and at first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. And we're going to highlight AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. We're going to underline had, hang together, die separately, had, and unify, right? So we have to hang together, okay? Otherwise, we die separately. Why do we die separately? Well, what kills alcoholics? A couple things. Either we kill ourselves out of misery, or we relapse, right? And the physical allergy leads us to a place where we lose control till we'll die, right? So why would that happen if we don't hang together? Well, again, it comes down to service, right? If you're not hanging with other alcoholics or addicts, then you're not being of service to other alcoholics and addicts. If you're not being of service to other alcoholics or addicts, then you're not connecting to the power of God. If you're not connecting to the power of God, then fear seeps into your life because you don't believe that you are taken care of, loved, wanted the best for, and all that good stuff no matter what. When fear seeps into the life, then what happens is we try to manage and control our life, right? But then we're attached to the outcomes, right? If we're attached to the outcomes, sometimes it works out great and sometimes it doesn't, right? So we're living this emotional instability of living in result, right? But either way, we're building up the case that we are not being taken care of and only we can take care of ourselves. And that's the lie, right? And it's lonely. And once we're in that place of despair, of that one last thing failing on us, and we're alone, and we feel like the world is against us, and we feel overwhelmed, and we feel depressed, and we feel like we can't get out of bed, or everything is hopeless, then it's either a drink sounds good, a little bit of drugs sounds good, or, killing ourselves sounds good. So, in order to avoid that, we need to hang together. We need to unify our fellowship. Now, in order to unify our fellowship, that means that we need to let go of judgment of each other. We need to let go of gossip of each other. We need to let go of looking at the differences of each other and just be all-inclusive to everyone around us, which means constantly thinking about how we can bless every single person in every situation that presents itself to us in every moment. Simple. As we discovered the principles by which the individual alcoholic could live, so we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. It was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society. And we're going to underline, it was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society. Every single person is welcome. Everyone. Which again, it means that we need to let go of anything that would drive us to want to exclude anybody, Everybody is welcome. It says that our leaders might serve but never govern, that each group was to be autonomous and there was to be no professional class of therapy. There were no fees or dues nor expenses to be met by our own voluntary contributions. There was to be the least possible organization, even in our service centers. Our public relations were to be based upon attraction rather than promotion. It was decided that all members ought to be anonymous at the level of press, TV, radio, and films. Sorry, I read that out of order. And in no circumstances should we give endorsements, make alliances, or enter public controversies. And all this is highlighted, and in the margin I have traditions, because basically that was the outline for our 12 traditions, right? It says this was the substance of AA's 12 traditions, which are stated in full on page 561 of this book. Though none of these principles have had the force of rules of laws, they had become so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. Today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets that our society has. So it says, while the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons: the large number of recoveries and reunited homes. So there's two reasons why AA grew. One is, yes, people recovered, but two, recovery wasn't just about staying sober. Recovery was about what kind of person we bring into every area of our life. So we reunite homes. We show up at the job. We take care of the people that are in front of us, right? So we become the best people that we could possibly be, you know, and that person that we bring out to the world, it's the example of Alcoholics Anonymous, brings more people in it, all right? So it says these made their impressions everywhere. It then says of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses. And among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. So we're going to highlight of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses. And among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. So I remember when I first got sober and I read that, I just thought to myself, they're trying to sell me on some shit, right? Because when I was in jail, I remember the counselors. So I was introduced to the 12-step program while I was in jail. The counselors looked around the room, and there were about 60 of us, and they said, 3 of you are going to stay clean, and the rest of you are either going to end up back in prison, relapse, or die, right? So that's definitely not 75%, okay? When I got out of jail and I went into sober living, the numbers I heard in Alcoholics Anonymous and in the sober living were 3% of you were going to stay sober, 7% of you were going to stay sober, and the most I think I ever heard was 12%, right? So this book is saying that 50% are going to get sober at once and remain that way, and 25% are going to sober up after some relapses. So that's 75% of the people are going to stay sober, right? So at 10 years of sobriety, when I reread this thing and I was, all kind of gung-ho about, okay, I'm going to be open-minded to this message because God, please take away everything I think I know about this book, about this process, and about you, God, so that I can have an experience with you. I thought to myself, okay, cool. I'm going to listen to this. 75%, huh? So what's changed? And I just had to look at my own personal experience to see what's changed. My personal experience told me that it took me 10 years of sobriety to find someone to take me through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous in this manner, to really scrutinize and look at it and learn from it and glean from it all the different little lessons that I never even knew existed in it. Now, if it says earlier in the foreword that, the main purpose of this book is to show us precisely how we have recovered, why did it take me so long to find someone to take me through the book? And I can only think that sponsorship has gotten lazy, right? So it's much easier to read a part of the 12 and 12, do a little writing and meet up and do a little discussion and move on, rather than sit and go through every line of this book and explain it. Now, it seems easy, but it's not, right? So in the end, that other kind of sponsorship did not work for me because I wasn't getting that much out of it because I didn't really understand why I was sponsoring people. I didn't really understand what the program was really about, which is all explained in this book. And I wound up feeling in the end resentful sometimes at sponsees. I felt depleted. My energy was depleted from working with people or taking phone calls or playing therapist or doing all these things, as opposed to having this book in between me and another human being and having this message be the uniting factor. Because every time I read this message, I feel full. Every time I pass this message on to somebody, I feel full. I've never felt depleted once during this new process, right? So basically, next to this paragraph, I have written diluted today. The reason why our success rate has changed is because the message that's being carried is diluted. Which means that the spiritual experience that people are having today is also diluted. The amount of peace and serenity and comfort in my own skin that I've gained through this new process in the last 10 years of my sobriety has been epic. Part of my story is that at 5.5 years of sobriety, I want to kill myself. At 6.5 years of sobriety, I want to kill myself. So there was a lot of troublesome times in the first 10 years of my sobriety where I was just feeling overwhelmed and felt like this thing wouldn't work for me. And I can assure you that in the last 10 years of my sobriety, doing it this way and really dedicating my life to this process, I have not gone to those depths of depression. Now, has my life been epically perfect? Have I lived like an angel and done everything right? No. In fact, some of my hardest sacrifices has been within the last 10 years of my sobriety. But the way I walked through them was with the courage of a man who is connected to a power greater than himself and has access to that power. And that is truly the difference, So I've been able to walk through things that are much more challenging in my life, feeling comfortable in my own skin, and feeling taken care of. So that is truly the gift. Moving on, other thousands came to a few AA meetings, and at first they decided didn't want the program, but great number of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed. Another reason for the wide acceptance of AA was the ministration. Ministration means aid or help of friends. Friends in medicine, religion, and the press, together with innumerable others who became our able and persistent advocates. So people who are not alcoholics, right? People in the press, people who are religious, people in medicine, doctors, they started to see what we were doing, and they started to see that this was actually successful and a gift, and them advocating for us really helped, right? Because it's the unbiased opinion. It says, without such support, AA could have made only the slowest progress. Some of the recommendations of AA's early medical and religious friends will be found further on in this book. It then says, Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. We're going to underline and highlight that. I'm going to read it twice more. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. And third time, Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. Here it is in black and white, people. This is not a religious organization. Yes, we connect to a thing called God, but literally God is whatever you want it to be. It does not matter. We are not affiliated with any particular faith. We are not affiliated with any particular organized religion or any particular spiritual practice. You can do whatever you want, whatever you feel comfortable, as long as you understand that there's something, right? And that understanding is just a choice belief, right? Now, it makes sense to choose to believe this, and we're going to discuss this in depth when we get to We Agnostics, just because it allows us to live a stable life, right? Because if there is no belief, and really if there is no purpose in life, and we are just kind of like drifting off on this giant dust ball in space for no reason, then what is the point? We should all just kill ourselves, right? But here we are in this existence. We're here. So it's like, why not believe that something is wanting the best for us, taking care of us, and loving us no matter what? If that's going to make our existence that's here, which is existing, a more comfortable one, why would we not just choose to do that, right? So that is as much of a concept as necessary, I guess. But in terms of it being affiliated with any anything, it's not. So we are not a religious organization. Again, those ideas of a God are my personal opinion. You don't have to like those either. You can do whatever you want. I really don't care, as long as you find something for yourself. Find what works for you. It says, neither does AA take any particular medical point of view, though we cooperate widely with men of medicine as well as men of religion. So I write page 133 next to that, right? Now we're going to go to page 133. I'm just going to read this real quickly. It says, in the third paragraph, but this does not mean that we disregard human health measures. God has abundantly supplied this world with fine doctors, psychologists, practitioners of various kinds. Do not hesitate to take your health problems to such persons. Most of them give freely of themselves, that their fellows may enjoy sound mind and bodies. Try to remember that though God has wrought miracles among us, we should never belittle a good doctor or psychiatrist. Their services are often indispensable in treating a newcomer and following his case afterwards. Now, I shared earlier that in my personal experience, I was diagnosed with depression, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and if I was born 10 years later, I probably would have been diagnosed bipolar, because that seems to be the trend these days, Now, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, in and of itself, has helped me more than any medicine has ever helped me, okay? But that doesn't mean that medicine doesn't work for other people. Now, there are people who have a lot of time in sobriety, who have a huge following and are almost like sober gurus I know back in America, who will get at the podium and share stuff like, if you are on antidepressants, you're not sober. Those people are wrong, okay, to say that. Because again, it says, neither does AA take any particular medical point of view. It's not our business to say that, all right? That is between you. That is between you and your sponsor, and God. It's between you and your personal intuition, okay? I am not an advocate for anything in particular. We just do what we need to do to get help. We have no monopoly on therapy or anything like that. This is just a way to recover from alcoholism and drug addiction. Now, for me personally, like I said, recovering from alcoholism and drug addiction has brought emotional stability and peace into my life. So that's all I particularly needed. My humble opinion, because I worked in treatment for a long time, is that people can't necessarily trust their diagnoses that they've been given when they were drinking and using, right? Because alcohol and drugs definitely affects what we look like to doctors and psychiatrists. I think also, this is my opinion, that we need to kind of clear out for the first 6 months, detox from all drugs and alcohol to really get an idea of where we stand. And also, treatment centers are going to hate me for saying this, but treatment centers should be set up to help people learn how to recover from alcoholism and drug addiction. I think bringing up, the underlying issues and trying to get to the core of why we drink and use, talking about when we were molested when we were 4 in our first 30 days of sobriety is irresponsible as a treatment practitioner. Really, we should be focusing on, okay, cool, building up behavior patterns and new thinking in order to learn how to stay sober, right? Sober long enough so that when it comes time to deal with those issues, we can. The underlying issue of why we drink and use is because we have a physical allergy to drugs and alcohol, and we have a mind that lies to us and tells us that we don't. Okay, rant over. That's my personal opinion. You can take it or leave it. I love you guys. Okay. Then it says, alcohol being no respecter of persons. We are an accurate cross-section of America, and in distant lands, the same democratic evening up process is now going on. So what it's saying there is, and we're going to highlight that alcohol don't give a fuck, right? It doesn't care who we are. It doesn't care if you're rich. It doesn't care if you're poor. It doesn't care if you're from the Middle East or if you're from Canada. It doesn't care what your religious background is or what gender you are or race or any of that stuff. If you are an alcoholic, it is going to kill you, right? So we are all in the same even playing field. It says by personal religious affiliation, we include Catholics. Protestants, Jews, Hindus, and a sprinkling of Muslims and Buddhists. That's amazing writing there. More than 15% of us are women. Yay. Okay, cool. So, alcohol doesn't care. If you're afflicted with alcoholism, you got it, period. It's going to kill you unless you treat it. It says at present our membership is pyramiding at the rate of about 20% per year. So far, upon the total problem of several million actual and potential alcoholics in the world, we have made only a scratch. In all probability, we shall never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcohol problem and all its ramifications. Upon therapy for the alcoholic himself, we surely have no monopoly. Boom, right there, no monopoly. I had some deep-seated issues with my family and my father and stuff like that, and some stuff that I just had a real challenge really working through, and I wound up doing a special kind of therapy at around maybe 13 years of sobriety, 14 years of sobriety that actually shifted it, which was awesome. So again, therapy is great. It says, yet it is our great hope that all those who have as yet found no answer may begin to find one in the pages of this book. Where? Oh shit, in this book. And will presently join us on the high road to a new freedom. So we're going to highlight, yet it is our great hope that all those who have as yet found no answer may begin to find one on the pages of this book and will presently join us on the high road to a new freedom. So the answer's in this book, and this book is going to give us freedom. We will no longer have to be a puppet on a string to life, where life happens and we have to react because that's what we do. We will have freedom. We will have choice. We will be able to live the life that we want, feeling the way that we want, experiencing it the way that we want. That is the gift of this book. Okay. We have something big written here. I'm going to read it 3 times. You ready? Let's go. In my self-centered way, I think the most important thing is the way I feel. I want people, principles, and institutions to change so I can feel better. I will go to any lengths to make things become what I want them to become so I can feel better. And there I was, trapped, waiting for all these things to change so I can feel better. So my troubles are my own making. The positive side is I can be healed or helped, and people, places, and things don't have to change for me to feel better. In my self-centered way, I think the most important thing is the way I feel. I want people, principles, and institutions to change so I can feel better. I will go to any lengths to make things become what I want them to become so I can feel better. And there I was, trapped, waiting for all these things to change so I can feel better. So my troubles are my own making. The positive side is I can be healed or helped, and people, places, and things don't have to change for me to feel better. Last time. In my self-centered way, I think the most important thing is the way I feel. I want people, principles, and institutions to change so I can feel better. I will go to any lengths to make things become what I want them to become so I can feel better. And there I was, trapped, waiting for all these things to change so I can feel better. So my troubles are my own making. The positive side is I can be healed or helped, and people, places, and things don't have to change for me to feel better. Now this is the epic life lesson in freedom, right? Freedom and powerlessness. So in my self-centered way, I think the most important thing is the way I feel. So self-centeredness is the problem, right? What we learn about feelings is that they're not necessarily based on reality, but they sculpt our experience, right? So if we're always thinking about ourselves and we're always thinking about the way we feel, then we're basically slaves to our own minds and our own feelings, right? And what happens is we want to arrange things to make us feel better. So we try to arrange people, we try to arrange principles, we try to arrange institutions, right? And we think that if we change all these things around us, that we will feel better. But We are powerless over people, places, things, and institutions. Life happens. You know, every once in a while, yes, of course, we can manipulate people to do what we want, blah, blah, blah. But typically, in the end, it usually backfires. Either it backfires directly where we get caught, or sometimes in those lonely moments, we sit with ourselves and we feel the disingenuousness of our existence, right? We know that we're manipulating. We know that we're living this lie. We know that we are projecting something to people on the outside that is not true to our insides, and it feels like shit. So that's another kind of unmanageability that happens as a result of trying to make everything become what we want them to become. And then we become dependent upon that, right? So if things don't work out our way, we just go into a place of feeling completely depressed, you know? And we feel like a failure. So it says, and there I was, trapped, waiting for all these things to change so I could feel better, right? So we become dependent upon that. So my troubles are my own making, right? Because all this stuff is coming from this self-centered desire to make everything be what we want it to be, okay? The positive side is I can be healed or helped. So we can, through this process, get to a place of not having things change for us to feel better, right? But to feel good about what's actually happening. Now, for me personally, the only way that I can feel good about the way stuff is happening is understand that everything that's happening is perfect for me in that moment, right? And this is where that faith comes in, and this is where that belief in what I like to call God or the universe or whatever you want to call it comes in. Now again, this is a choice that I make. It's not based on, okay, cool, I saw it and there it was, you know. I made the choice, and now looking back, because my perspective has shifted, I can look at my life and see that yes, it did exist, and I can, you know, point out all the different times in my life where the universe has showed up to me for me and given me what I wanted no matter what, right? So the whole process that we are going to go through is to basically find and connect to some sort of power so that we can feel comfortable in our own skin, so that we don't feel trapped, so that we can live our life in complete freedom. And that's what this is about. All right. Moving right along. Forward to the third edition. By March 1976, when this edition went to the printer, the total worldwide membership of Alcoholics Anonymous was conservatively estimated at more than 1 million, with almost 28,000 groups meeting in over 90 countries. Again, this is reiterating the idea that this is spreading. It wouldn't spread if it didn't work. Surveys of the group in the United States and Canada indicate that AA is reaching out not only to more and more people, but to a wider and wider range. Women now make up more than 1/4 of the membership. Among newer members, the proportions is nearly 1/3. 7% of AAs surveyed are less than 30 of age, among them, many in their teens. Okay, so we got a whole crop of new people coming in. Why do we think it is? Well, it's 1976. What brought me to my knees at 22 years old? Meth. So drugs. Drugs are bringing people to their knees at an early and earlier age. That's why there's this rise of people under 30 coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Because we're hitting bottoms a lot harder, a lot earlier. Now, those of you hardcore AA people out there who are like, why is he talking about drugs and, you know, talk about the AA book and blah, blah, blah. Don't worry, I'm going to address all that stuff probably in page 7 in the big book, page 22 in the big book, and a few other times in the doctor's opinion as well. So hold your horses, keep going. We're going to address all the goodness. So it says, the basic principles of the AA program, it appears, hold good for individuals with many different lifestyles, just as the program has brought recovery to those of many different nationalities. So we're going to underline and highlight the basic principles of the AA program, it appears, hold good for individuals with many different lifestyles, just as the program has brought recovery to those of many different nationalities. And we're going to circle recovery, right? Now, this is basically the answer to what we read on the page before, which said, alcohol being no respecter of persons, we are an accurate cross-section of America and in distant lands. The same democratic evening up process is now going on. So if that said that alcohol doesn't care who we are, it will kill you. This is saying the solution doesn't care who you are, it will save you, right? The solution will apply to anyone, just like alcoholism will apply to anyone too, right? So basically, none of us are unique to this solution, okay? If you are an alcoholic or if you are a drug addict, this solution will work for you, period. Okay, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your beliefs are, what your socioeconomic background is, what religion you are, any of that stuff, doesn't matter. It says the 12 steps that summarize the program may be called Los 12 Pasos in one country, horrible accent, Le Deux in another, that was even worse accent, but I don't care. But they trace exactly the same path to recovery that was blazed by the earliest members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're going to highlight that, but they trace exactly the same path to recovery that was blazed by the earliest members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, blazed means to burst out suddenly or intensely, right? So the path that was blazed by the earliest members of Alcoholics Anonymous is in this book, right? Because this book was written in 1939. This is the purest form of what that path would look like. Everything else that you've heard about this path in meetings, you probably can take or leave, because the reality is that meetings are kind of like one long game of telephone, right? Or one long game of Chinese whispers if you're from a country that relates to what Chinese whispers is, which means that the message in meetings has been distorted over the years. But in this book, it's black and white, it stayed the same, it's been kept intact. This is the message of recovery, and it says blazed, right? So obviously, we are only in the forward to the third edition, and we've discussed being of service multiple times already. That's what this program is about, serving others, going out and blessing people. The whole program works on the idea of taking people through the book so that you treat your body, your mind, and your spirit simultaneously. And that aspect of the program needs to be blazed. You need to burst out suddenly or intensely into serving other people. Boom. That's what it's about. So it says, in spite of the great increase in size and span of this fellowship is an association between individuals, especially on pleasant, equal, and intimate terms. So there's a reason why they use the word fellowship. Pleasant. So we need to be kind and loving to each other. Equal. No one is better or different than anyone else. We're all in the same field, right? And intimate. When someone asks me, Michaelis, how you doing today? I'm just like, fine, right? That's not intimate. That's not authentic. That's just me like saying whatever I'm supposed to say to get you off my back, right? So the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is supposed to be a safe place where we can talk openly and freely and honestly with each other about how we really feel and what's really going on with us, because it's only by shining a light on the supposed darkness can we actually turn the darkness into light, right? Now, this applies to everywhere. You know, this doesn't just apply to Alcoholics Anonymous, because again, everything that we learn in AA is really about what we take out into the world. So for all you non-alcoholics out there or non-drug addicts out there, have some intimate relationships, right? Start talking honestly with each other, because what you're going to find out is that we're all in the same boat. Everyone is struggling with something, and it's only by sharing about it with each other do you take the power away from it, lift each other up and help each other, and we finally get to unite, right? And maybe some of these outside things that we separate ourselves over will just dissipate because we realize that they are meaningless, right? Okay, cool. It says, in spite of the great increase in the size and span of the fellowship, at its core it remains simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. And we're going to underline and highlight, each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. And we're going to circle sharing experience, strength, and hope. So a person can recover, right? If they speak to another human being, sharing their experience, what they went through, the issues in their life, their strength, who they talked to find solution, and then applied that solution, and the hope. What happened as a result of you applying that solution to your life? You know what I mean? When we start sharing that stuff with each other on an intimate and authentic level, we start to know each other, and we start to lift each other up in ways that we wouldn't otherwise. And that's the beauty of AA. And hopefully that will become the beauty of what the world runs by, right? Moving on, 4th edition, blowing through it. Forward to the 4th edition. This 4th edition of Alcoholics Anonymous came off press in November of 2001. At the start of the new millennium, since the 3rd edition was published in 1976, worldwide membership of AA has just about doubled to an estimated 2 million or more, with nearly 100,800 groups meeting in approximately 150 countries around the world. Literature has played a major role in the AA growth, and a striking phenomenon of the past quarter century has been the explosion of translations of our basic literature into many languages and dialects. In country after country where the AA seed is planted, it has taken root, slowly at first, and then growing by leaps and bounds when literature has become available. Currently, Alcoholics Anonymous has been translated into 43 languages. Woohoo! As the message of recovery has reached larger numbers of people, it has also touched the lives of a vastly greater variety of suffering alcoholics. When the phrase, "we are people who would normally not mix," we're going to highlight that. Look around you in your fellowship. Would you actually hang out with a lot of these people? Hell no. But Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or whatever 12-Step Anonymous has brought you guys together because we have a common peril that we've been through, right? So it says, when the phrase, "we are people who normally not mix," was written in 1939, it referred to a fellowship composed largely of men and a few women with quite similar ethnic and economic backgrounds. So when AA got started, those people probably would mix, because like I told you before, they were a bunch of white, old, mostly Christian, rich businessmen, right, who drank alcohol. So it makes sense that those people came together, but they could not have imagined what the 12-step program would turn into in terms of attracting people from all different walks of life, right? It says, like so much of AA's basic text, and we're going to highlight basic text because, again, we're reiterating that this book is not a novel. It's not something that you just have by your bedside and just read and like, oh my God, I've recovered because I've read a book and I feel so much better. But no, this is a textbook. There's a design for living embedded in this textbook, and it needs to be taught and it needs to be studied. There's a teacher and a student. That is the way this book needs to be read. Like so much of AA's basic text, those words have proved to be far more visionary than the founding members could have ever imagined. The stories added to this collection represent a membership whose characteristics of age, gender, race, and culture have widened and deepened to encompass virtually everyone the first 100 members could have hoped to help or reach. While our literatures preserve the integrity of the AA message, let me read that again. While our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message, one more time. While our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message. Okay, that was a good pause right there. Sweeping changes in society as a whole are reflected in new customs and practices within the fellowship. Some people clap at birthdays, some people don't. Some people sing, some people don't. It's great. Okay, moving on. Taking advantage of technological advances. For example, AA members with computers can participate in meetings online, sharing with fellow alcoholics across the country, around the world. The first time I was ever exposed to online meeting was a dude I knew in treatment who was in Marijuana Anonymous, and he did online meetings. That was his deal. And I just thought, like, how appropriate that is for Marijuana Anonymous. Like, you just finished your fucking gaming, you got cheesy poofs. I don't know why they always pop in my brain, but you got your cheesy poof all over your fingers. You're so excited. It's like everything's orange, and you just click on a new window, and boom, you're at a meeting. You don't even have to leave the chair. It's amazing. Go Marijuana. All right. It says, in any meeting, anywhere, AAs share experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to stay sober and help other alcoholics. We're going to highlight that. AAs share experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to stay sober and help other alcoholics. Next to that, you're going to write purpose of meetings. In any meeting, anywhere, what we do is we share experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to stay sober and help other alcoholics. And that's how we share. We share experience, strength, and hope with each other. Okay, so if you're brand new, all right, and you don't know It's all good. Go in that meeting and vent and talk shit and complain about how fucking horrible your life is. It's all good. You know what I mean? Until you get a new message to share. But people with time who've been around the block and who, kind of know what's up, it is our responsibility to share the tape all the way through, okay? Which means that we need to have some tools going on in our lives. So we need to share the experience. So the experience is the issue, right? It's the divorce, it's the bankruptcy, it's the dog dying, it's the whatever's going on, right? The strength is, okay, cool. I didn't fucking just lock myself in my room. I went out and I called somebody. I spoke to them about it. I spoke to my support group. I prayed, I meditated, I did some things, right? I got an answer, an outside perspective answer. I got an intuitive, inspired answer. And then the hope is, okay, cool. I applied that answer to my life, and this is what happened as a result of it. This is the difference, right? So it's important as people with time and experience to share the tape all the way through, because again, we are always examples to the newcomers. If we go in there and we just start complaining about how everyone in AA sucks, or how our job sucks, or how blah 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 blah, ungrateful, yada yada yada, then people who are new are going to listen to us and be like, why would I ever want to be a part of that? That sucks. I do not want to be sober to be miserable, right? So remember, we are always examples to the newcomers in the media of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're new, get a support group, right? Get a group of people around you who want to help you live a life to your fullest happiness, contentness. I don't know if those words make sense, but it's cool, right? You know what I mean? Like, find someone who supports you in your complete happiness, right? So you have people around you that you can run your shit by when you're feeling bad, that will tell you the truth to help you have a spiritual experience, right? So that when you go and share about it in a meeting, you can have your issue, you can have your support group, you can share about talking to your support group, and you can share about applying the solution your support group gave you to your life, right? And what happened as a result of that versus what has always happened in your life before you ever had AA, right? Experience, strength, and hope. Again, that's the purpose of a meeting. It says modem and modem are face-to-face. AA speak the language of the heart in all its power and simplicity. So what we are going to learn is that the language of the heart is powerful, and it's very simple. Just like the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous is extremely powerful, but it's extremely simple. So again, here I wrote experience is life issue, strength, reached out for solution, hope, result of applying solution to my life, just to break that down. So I know it's 57 minutes and 45 seconds, but I want to start the doctor's opinion fresh. So this is about an hour. I hope you enjoy this. Hope I didn't offend too many people, and I will see you next sesh.